What do you think about the whole facade here, Gavin, where you see it's GT,
Yeah.
and that's the theme of the Fontana paintings.
Yeah.
We see that it's Gavin Turk.
Yeah.
We gradually work it out that the Fontanas are really Gavin Turks.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the match upstairs, which is flashing, like has that kind of neon quality of like, being a strange attractor about it. Sort of says open, open.
With you, those perforations are not just spatial; they also spell something out.
They're text as well. Yeah, they're sort of semaphore. They're sort of text, I suppose. But I mean. So obviously one of the things about it is about this idea of signature.
Yes.
So I'm sort of signing across the middle of the picture.
Yes.
As a sort of almost like a kind of signature. But there's still a question as to whether someone's initials almost like qualify as a signature. Like if Lucio Fontana just gets reduced to Fontana. Like, do I get reduced to Turk, or do I get reduced to GT, or do I get reduced to Gavin, or like what's the, in a way, like I'm curious about like how artists are kind of remembered, about how they're in a way like their legacy, just in terms of just that the idea of using an artist's name to illustrate a whole kind of idea. You go, this in the way that Fontana does this.
Yes.
And that's like shorthand, and everyone thinks that they all know what that means. But obviously, there's lots of different kinds of artists, of all artists. There's lots of different kinds of ways that artists work. There's different ways that they're going to get.
So you're sort of
seen.
interfering with the notion Fontana. You're interfering it with the notion Gavin Turk.
Sort of,
for the philosophical fun of it.
Well, yeah, I mean, to question my own practice, to question my own ability to authorise, but also maybe to question the ability for any artist or any artwork to be authorised in itself.
They get it, the audience, because a lot of it's about reception. The audience getting what
Perception and reception. It's also like the audience bringing their information to the art. I mean, I think what I try to do a lot of the times is to try to show people something that contains in it the idea that maybe a little bit later on, if they're still looking at it, like they get a sense that they didn't understand it straight away, that it wasn't what they thought it was. And the difference between them understanding it at one moment in time and then them re-understanding it again perhaps gives them a little space within which they can question like what their preconceptions and what their, in a way, like what they've brought to the artwork before they looked at it. Is this idea that once something seems to have an authority, people stop thinking about it.
Yes, exactly.
They go, oh, well, that's a famous painting.
Yes.
All I can do is just bathe in the presence of an important artwork.
Yes.
I can't anymore ask the questions. I can't anymore challenge it. I can't anymore kind of reinterpret it with my own. In a way, I'm almost not involved. It exists in this kind of higher space. Where it becomes impenetrable.
Yes. Not all creativity has this sacred bracketing.
No. So then there's a value system which is put on simply like creativity, which in a way is it's impossible to value.
Yes.
Like it's something that is something that just. For me, I think it's something that just should be encouraged.
Yes.
It's part of a. Once we've become conscious and once people are thinking, then I think they probably need to carry on and think a bit more, and think a bit more diversely, and think a bit more laterally, and it's slightly abstracted.
So the viewer's got to do a bit of work.
The viewer's kind of got to put things together a bit. Like the fact that there's a GT there almost has to look like it was an accident.
Yes.
Like, oh, I'm seeing GT when it isn't actually there.
Yes.
It's as well, like I suppose like part of the mechanism of the art is to sort of almost like to subliminally suggest that GT exists everywhere, and that maybe when you go out of the show you start seeing GT like in other things. So basically that these pieces as well they're called holy eggs. And obviously I've done, up till now, I've made probably like over 500 different works with eggs. So the egg itself, although I'm borrowing it from Fontana, the egg itself is a signature of me as well.
Right.
It's kind of a portal, or for me, it's a kind of one of my legends, I
Yes.
suppose. To be honest, the metal, I mean, this show has quite a lot of the metal ones, and the metal ones for me like a more recent, it's a more recent development.
Well, for one thing, it's a very pretty, beautiful object. The glinting metallic that just comes through around the side, and then all this subtle pooling and swirling and oxidized effects, and then the graphic effects of the dots. Even before you start to get the meaning, before you start to think about the GT and the
I mean, it is. Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think it does look very like a sort of design object somehow.
Well, very effectively. It's a very effective design object. And what's going inside makes the edges seem very organic, the outer edges. And then you're alerted to the fact that they are all different and they all have their own being. You're as an artist, your approach is an interesting hybrid of conceptual and very aesthetic making. You've got you're a sculptor really.
Yeah.
But your sculptural practice overlaps very much with the concerns of conceptual art throughout the 20th century. And in a way, your subject is conceptual art throughout the 20th century. And yet the way that you do it is a very sort of hands-on, felt aesthetic thing.
I try to work in a subjective and objective way simultaneously. So I try to sort of feel my way through it, as well as sort of mentally.
Yes.
Quite often I would say that my work's a bit like architectural, because I have the idea and then I kind of then just go ahead and make it, and I don't work almost like through the making. I don't make a little bit and go, oh, this suggests, and then make this, and then oh. But actually, there is quite a lot of. There is a bit of both. There is a bit of kind of cooking the books as we go,
playing with the process.
Yeah.
Unpredictability.
Yeah, and I suppose that there's points at which, that it can go wrong. It can sort of like not quite look right, and so then it needs some adjustment to kind of make it feel and look like what you want it to look like. Also, like, it's got a recycle sign on it as well, which is quite good. So I've sort of recycled it.
Yeah, which of course is your practice. The essence of your practice is recycling.
Yeah. So the thing with the polystyrene teacup was this idea of again, I was trying to think of something that was quintessentially English, which was like having a cup of tea, and then I was trying to think about taking a cup of tea outside where you could see the landscape. Yeah. So it was like Constable and Turner, and this idea of the nomadic cup of tea. So you could then, with this special cup, you could take it outside and appreciate the landscape and have a cup of tea. So it's a very quintessentially English thing.
Isn't that funny? So out of that bit of old rubbish, you've managed to extract ideas about English landscape art, actually preserving the landscape, ideas of ecology.
And then also someone's fiddling as they were having a conversation. They've got their nail and they've actually sculpted a kind of filigree pattern around the top of the cup.
So there's primitive creativity.
Yeah. I guess it was like the end of the 50s, beginning of the 60s. And she's not, to be honest, she's not really presented very much, not really seen very much in the UK. I was quite taken with the work, and I made this piece some years ago and had it just knocking around in the studio. And it was only when the people from the gallery came to my studio, no one in my studio knew what it was. In fact, a couple of times they tried to throw it away, and I was like, no, I want that, I'm still looking at that. So we've got a paint tube which possibly goes with the palette outside. So it's a sort of reclining figure. It's lost its lid. You can't tell really what colour it is. Yeah. And so then this is like painted bronze paint. Yeah. So it's that sort of, pop will eat itself. Yes. Kind of. It's now the kind of the process of the trompe l'oeil is trumping its trump, or something like that. It's like the dog sort of slightly catching its tail thing. So this is piss on the picture. Yeah. I don't think he never actually did. He did a portrait one with Jean-Michel Basquiat, where he took Basquiat's face and had the piss on it. Yeah. But I don't think he actually ever did his own face with the piss on it.
Yes, that's interesting.
But he did do his face with camouflage on it, and I like the way that this is sort of a bit like the camouflage.
Maybe he thought it would offend his mother.
Maybe.
Yes, no, I like the mixture of. I agree. The mixture of camouflage and piss is good.
And so obviously then this was the sort of, again, like the follow-up to the Sid Vicious piece as Elvis. Then there was me sort of like doing a kind of, again, a sort of impersonation of Elvis. Yeah. Which is obviously so wonderfully not Elvis, because Elvis is so obviously iconic that you couldn't ever mistake it for being Elvis, but you would know that it was not Elvis.
Yes, that's right.
You wouldn't know who it was, but what you'd know is that it was not Elvis.
Absolutely.
There was enough kind of character, enough sort of there's enough kind of clues to let you know that what it wasn't. So the id was done like with a sort of sans serif kind of ID, so it looked very kind of almost like a emoticon or whatever those things are, where you've got a line and a shape. It looked quite designy. And then the superego was done in a kind of typewriter, almost like Kossuth type kind of way, sort of written
elaborated ego
in a very moral way. Yeah.
It really has got the feel of the screen test, Warhol's screen test.
But what's funny about the screen test is obviously like that weird thing about like, oh, what is the person being filmed? What are they thinking?
That's
and
right.
and what's Warhol thinking? We're done.